At Christmas, my daughter-in-law smirked, "If it wasn't for pity, no one would have invited you." I just laughed and said nothing. When I got home, I froze all the family accounts they'd been using with my money. But even I couldn't predict how far my daughter-in-law would go for money. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Let me take you back to how this whole mess started. I'm Margaret, and at 64, I thought I'd earned the right to enjoy my golden years. My husband Robert died 2 years ago, leaving me comfortably well off, but devastatingly lonely. When my son David and his wife Jessica started struggling financially, helping them felt natural. After all, what's money for if not to help family? For 2 years, I'd been quietly paying their mortgage, car payments, and credit card bills. Not because I had to, but because I wanted David to feel successful. Jessica never worked, claiming she was finding herself through yoga and wellness retreats that somehow cost thousands. But I bit my tongue. Happy wife, happy life, right? Christmas Day arrived with the usual fanfare at David's house. Jessica had outdone herself with decorations, all purchased with my money, though she'd never acknowledged that. The whole extended family was there. Aunts, uncles, cousins, all gathered around the massive dining table I'd helped buy. Everything seemed perfect until Jessica stood up for her toast. She raised her wine glass, that calculated smile spreading across her face. "I want to thank everyone for being here today. Family is so important, especially for those who have nowhere else to go." Her eyes locked on mine. "We're just so blessed to be able to open our hearts and home to those in need. Margaret, we know how lonely you've been since Robert passed, and honestly, if it wasn't for pity, no one would have invited you anywhere for the holidays." The room went dead silent. I could feel every pair of eyes on me, watching for my reaction. David looked mortified, but said nothing. Nothing. My own son sat there like a statue while his wife publicly humiliated me. I smiled sweetly and raised my water glass. "How thoughtful of you, Jessica. I'm truly grateful for your honesty." Inside, I was calculating exactly which accounts needed to be frozen first. The rest of dinner passed in a blur. Jessica continued playing the gracious hostess while I mentally cataloged every payment I'd made on their behalf. The house they were so proud of, my down payment, the cars in their driveway, my monthly payments, her yoga classes and spa treatments, my generosity. When I got home that evening, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and started making calls. First, I contacted my bank and froze the automatic transfers to David's mortgage company. Then I called the credit card companies and removed myself as the guarantor on their accounts. By the time I finished, it was nearly midnight. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat back, feeling oddly calm. Jessica wanted honesty? She was about to get more than she bargained for. My phone started ringing at 8 the next morning. "Mom, what the hell did you do?" David's voice crackled through the phone, panic making him sound like a teenager again. I sipped my coffee slowly, watching the snow fall outside my kitchen window. "Good morning to you too, sweetheart. How was your Boxing Day?" "Don't play games with me." The mortgage payment bounced. "The bank called at 7 this morning. Jessica is having a complete meltdown." I almost smiled at that image. "I canceled the automatic transfer, David. Seemed like the responsible thing to do after yesterday's dinner conversation." "You can't be serious. You're going to destroy our credit over something Jessica said?" "Something she said. Like it was a minor comment about the weather instead of a calculated public humiliation." "David, do you remember what your wife said about me yesterday?" Silence stretched between us. Of course he remembered. He was just hoping I'd pretend it never happened, like I always did. She was just trying to be funny. "Mom, you know how Jessica is?" Yes, I knew exactly how Jessica was. Manipulative, entitled, and apparently stupid enough to bite the hand that fed her. Funny. That's an interesting way to describe it. "Look, can we talk about this in person? Come over for lunch today. Jessica wants to apologize." I laughed. Actually laughed. "No, I don't think so. But tell Jessica I appreciate the thought." After hanging up, I decided to do a little research. Jessica had always been vague about her background, claiming she came from a complicated family situation. David, ever the white knight, had never pressed for details. But I had resources now, and more importantly, I had motivation. A private investigator I'd found online quoted $800 for a comprehensive background check within 72 hours. I sent the payment immediately, knowing I needed professional-grade information, not just internet searches. While I waited, I started going through 2 years of financial records. The numbers were staggering. I'd spent over $180,000 supporting David and Jessica's lifestyle. House payments, cars, credit cards, her endless wellness treatments, his golf club membership. I'd been funding their entire existence while Jessica treated me like a charity case. The private investigator called 3 days later. "Mrs. Thompson, I have that information you requested about Jessica Marie Coleman. You might want to sit down for this. What did you find?" Jessica Coleman has had 3 previous marriages, not one as she claimed. 2 ended in divorce under suspicious financial circumstances. The 3rd husband died in what appeared to be an accident, though there were some irregularities. My blood ran cold. What kind of irregularities? Jake Morrison died in a hiking accident 18 months after their marriage. There was a substantial life insurance policy, $400,000, that had been increased significantly just months before his death. The insurance company investigated, but found no grounds to deny the claim. I gripped the phone tighter. What else? She has 2 children from her first marriage, boys now ages 12 and 14. She abandoned them when they were 7 and 9, about 5 years ago. She owes approximately $28,000 in back child support. Children. Jessica had children she'd abandoned, and David knew nothing about it. My son, who desperately wanted kids, was married to a woman who'd walked away from her own. That evening, David showed up at my door, unannounced. He looked terrible, exhausted and stressed. Part of me wanted to mother him, to fix everything like I always had. But the larger part, the part that remembered Jessica's smirk, held firm. "We need to talk. Mom." Then talk. He slumped onto my couch like the weight of the world was on his shoulders. The mortgage company called again. "We've got 30 days to bring the account current, or they'll start foreclosure proceedings." That sounds serious. "Don't do this. Don't play games. You know we can't afford the house without your help. Then maybe you should downsize. There are lovely apartments on the other side of town." His face went white. "You want us to lose our home because of a stupid comment?" I sat across from him, studying the son I'd raised to be better than this. "David, do you think what Jessica said was appropriate?" He shifted uncomfortably. "No. But, no buts. Do you think I deserve to be humiliated in front of our entire family?" "Of course not. But Jessica's been stressed lately. Money troubles. You know how it is." Money troubles I'd been solving for 2 years without a word of gratitude. "Tell me about Jessica's previous marriages." "David." The color drained from his face completely. "What previous marriages?" "She's been married 3 times before you, David. Not once." He stared at me like I'd grown a second head. "That's impossible." She showed me her divorce papers from college. Those were from her first marriage. There were 2 more after that. I could see the questions forming in his eyes. But he wasn't ready to hear the answers yet. "This is crazy, Mom. You're investigating my wife like she's some kind of criminal. Tell me about her children." "What children?" "Jessica can't have children. She had complications from endometriosis in her 20s. Poor David. Still believing his wife's lies, even when the truth was staring him in the face. But I could see cracks forming in his certainty. "David, I need you to come back tomorrow. Alone. There are things you need to see." David arrived the next morning, looking like he hadn't slept. I had printed copies of everything the investigator had sent me, organized in neat folders on my dining room table. "What's all this, Mom?" "Documentation of your wife's real history. Have a seat." He remained standing, arms crossed defensively. "I'm not going to participate in whatever this is. Then you can leave, but you'll never get another dollar from me, and Jessica will find someone new to fund her lifestyle within 6 months. That got his attention. He sat down reluctantly, eyeing the documents suspiciously. I started with the marriage certificates and divorce papers. Jessica Marie Coleman, married at 19 to Brad Williams, divorced 2 years later when she was caught transferring money from his accounts to her own. David picked up the papers with shaking hands, his face growing paler as he read. "This doesn't prove anything. Lots of people have messy divorces. Keep reading. Marriage number 2 to Marcus Hayes ended when Marcus died in a single car accident after 8 months of marriage. $200,000 life insurance payout." "Car accidents happen, Mom." "They do. But they seem to happen frequently to Jessica's husbands." Marriage number 3, Jake Morrison, Hiking accident, $400,000 insurance payout. David was quiet for a long time, studying the paperwork. When he looked up, his face had changed. You're saying Jessica killed these men? I'm not saying anything. I'm showing you facts and letting you draw your own conclusions. He pushed back from the table, running his hands through his hair. This is insane. Jessica isn't a killer. She cries during movies about animals. David, there's more. I slid the child support documents across the table. Tyler and Mason Coleman, now 12 and 14. She hasn't paid support in 5 years. She told me she couldn't have children. She lied about that too, just like she lied about everything else. David was crying now, quiet tears that broke my heart. This was my baby boy, and I was destroying his world. But better he face the truth now than end up dead in a year. I need to think about this, he said finally. David, whatever you decide, don't let Jessica know that you know. Not yet. You think she'd hurt me? I thought about the pattern of dead husbands, the life insurance policies, the systematic lies. I think Jessica is capable of more than either of us imagined. After David left, I felt hollow but determined. I'd planted the seeds of doubt. Now I had to wait and see if they'd grow into the truth strong enough to save my son's life. My phone rang that afternoon. Unknown number. Mrs. Thompson. This is Tyler Coleman. My heart stopped. Tyler? How did you get my phone number? My dad hired a private investigator to find our mom. We know she married your son. I called your son's house, and a neighbor gave me your number. Tyler sounded older than his 12 years, too familiar with adult problems. Tyler, you shouldn't be calling me directly. This is complicated. Mrs. Thompson, my mom is dangerous. She hurt people, including us. Are you going to help her hurt your son too? What do you mean she hurt you? She used to hit us when she got angry about money, and she made us lie to people about who we were. But mostly she scared us. Dad says she owes us money, but we just want her to stay away from us. After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen staring at the phone. Jessica had not only abandoned her children, but abused them. Now she was targeting my son with the same calculating cruelty. I called David immediately. I need you to come over tonight. There's someone you need to hear from. Mom, I can't handle any more revelations today. This isn't a revelation, David. It's a warning. That evening, with David sitting beside me, I called Tyler back and put him on speakerphone. Tyler's young voice filled my living room as he told his story with heartbreaking, matter-of-fact tone. She left us when I was 7 and Mason was 5. Just packed up one day and said she was going on a trip. Dad got a divorce paper in the mail 2 months later. She never came back. David's face went white as Tyler continued. Dad showed us newspaper stories about Jake, the man she married after she left us. He died on a hiking trip, but Dad says the insurance company asked a lot of questions. Tyler, David said carefully, do you remember Jake? Yeah, he was nice to us for a while. Mom said we were going to be a family, but then she started getting angry with him about money, just like she used to with Dad. After the call ended, David and I sat in silence for several minutes. She was married to Jake while she was still technically married to their father, I said finally. The timeline doesn't work otherwise. David nodded slowly, the pieces finally clicking into place in his mind. Mom, what if she's planning to do the same thing to me? That's what I'm afraid of. What do? We get professional help. Tomorrow morning, we're calling the FBI. The FBI took our concerns more seriously than I'd expected. Agent Rebecca Stone, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, arrived at my house the next morning with Detective Sarah Martinez from the local police. Mrs. Thompson, the information you've compiled is quite extensive. Have you shared any of this with Jessica? She doesn't know we've investigated her background, if that's what you're asking. Agent Stone spread the documents across my kitchen table, making notes as she reviewed each one. The pattern here is concerning. 2 suspicious deaths, abandoned children, systematic financial fraud. We're going to need to investigate this thoroughly. Detective Martinez looked at David. Mr. Thompson, we need to ask you about your marriage. Has Jessica pressured you to increase any life insurance policies? David went pale. Last month she suggested I increase my policy to $500,000. For our future children, she said. Agent Stone and Detective Martinez exchanged glances. Mr. Thompson, we strongly recommend you don't make any changes to your insurance or financial arrangements until we complete our investigation. How long will that take? a few weeks for the initial investigation. But Mr. Thompson, during that time, you need to be very careful. Don't let Jessica know you suspect anything. Continue your normal routines, but stay alert to any changes in her behavior. After the agents left, David and I sat in my kitchen, both overwhelmed by the reality of what we were facing. Mom, I feel like such an idiot. How did I miss all the signs? Because you're a good person who assumes others are good too. Jessica is skilled at manipulation. She's probably done this before. What if you're wrong? What if there's an explanation for all of this? I understood his need to hope, but the evidence was overwhelming. David, even if half of what we've discovered is true, Jessica has lied to you about fundamental things. Her children, her past marriages, her ability to have children. That alone tells us who she really is. Over the next 2 weeks, we tried to maintain normal family interactions while Agent Stone's team investigated Jessica's background. It was the most stressful period of my life, watching my son pretend everything was fine while knowing his wife might be planning to kill him. Agent Stone called on a Thursday evening with preliminary results. Mrs. Thompson, we've confirmed most of your investigators' findings. Jessica Coleman has indeed been married multiple times, and there are significant questions about the circumstances of Jake Morrison's death. What kind of questions? The hiking area where Jake died had several witnesses that day who saw Jessica and Jake arguing about money. Jake was an experienced hiker, but he apparently fell from an area with stable footing. The medical examiner noted some inconsistencies, but couldn't definitively rule it homicide. My blood ran cold. What about the insurance investigation? The insurance company suspected fraud but couldn't prove it. However, they did note that Jessica had increased Jake's policy by $200,000 just 3 months before his death, claiming they were planning to start a family. The pattern was becoming clear. Jessica married men, isolated them from their support systems, increased their life insurance, then eliminated them when they became suspicious or troublesome. Agent Stone, is my son in immediate danger? We believe so. Mrs. Thompson, we need to move quickly. We're going to arrange for Jessica's arrest, but we need David's cooperation to make the charges stick. That night, Agent Stone met with David and me to plan Jessica's arrest. The strategy was complex. David would wear a wire during a conversation designed to get Jessica to reveal information about her past or her plans. This is dangerous, Agent Stone warned. If Jessica suspects David knows the truth, she might act immediately. David's voice was steady when he answered. I won't let her hurt anyone else. If she killed Jake and abandoned her own children, she needs to be stopped. The next evening, David came home with flowers and wine, playing the role of the devoted husband. Agent Stone and her team were positioned around the house, listening to every word through David's concealed microphone. Jessica, we need to talk about our future, David said, pouring wine for both of them. What about our future, honey? I've been thinking about life insurance, estate planning, all that responsible husband stuff. I was listening from the surveillance van, my heart pounding as David carefully guided the conversation toward the topics we needed Jessica to address. That's wonderful, David. I've been thinking about that too, especially after what happened to poor Jake. David kept his voice casual. Jake? You've never mentioned anyone named Jake. There was a pause, then Jessica's laugh, too bright and forced. Did I say Jake? I meant my friend's ex-husband. Such a sad story. But the slip was enough, combined with the evidence we'd gathered and the testimony from Jessica's abandoned children. Agent Stone had enough to make an arrest. The following morning, as Jessica returned from her yoga class, Agent Stone and Detective Martinez were waiting in my driveway. Jessica Coleman, you're under arrest for insurance fraud and suspicion of murder. Jessica's arrest made the local news within hours. Local woman arrested in multi-state murder investigation ran across the evening broadcast, complete with photos of Jessica being led away in handcuffs. But I knew this was just the beginning. Agent Stone called me that evening with an update. Jessica isn't talking, but her lawyer is already claiming this is all circumstantial evidence. We need more to make the murder charges stick. What about Tyler and Mason? Won't their testimony help? It will, but we need adult witnesses or physical evidence. Kids' memories can be challenged in court, especially traumatic memories from years ago. I felt frustrated, but not defeated. What can we do to help? Keep David safe, and let us do our job. Jessica made bail this afternoon. My blood ran cold. She's out? Her lawyer argued she wasn't a flight risk since she has strong community ties through her marriage to David. The judge set bail at $500,000, and somehow Jessica's legal team managed to post it. That night, David stayed at my house. We were both too nervous to sleep, jumping at every sound outside. Mom, where would Jessica get $500,000 for bail? The same place she got the money for an expensive legal team. She's not working alone. The next morning brought confirmation of my fears. Agent Stone arrived at my door with Detective Martinez and 2 other FBI agents. Mrs. Thompson, we've discovered that Jessica is part of a larger network. The bail money came from an organization that specializes in insurance fraud schemes targeting wealthy older men. How many people are we talking about? We're not sure yet. But we've identified at least 12 suspicious deaths across 6 states, all following the same pattern. Attractive women marry wealthy men, then arrange accidents after increasing life insurance policies. David sank into a chair. So I was just another target. Actually, Mr. Thompson, you were different. Most of their targets are men over 60 who are socially isolated. You're younger and have family who pay attention. That might be why Jessica was taking longer than usual to execute her plan. Detective Martinez added, "We believe Jessica was supposed to eliminate you within the first year of marriage, but your mother's involvement complicated their timeline." I felt a chill, realizing that my financial support had actually protected David by making Jessica overconfident and slower to act. Agent Stone continued, "The problem is, now that Jessica knows we're investigating, she's become desperate. Desperate people make dangerous choices." As if summoned by our conversation, my phone rang. Jessica's name appeared on the caller ID. "Don't answer it," Agent Stone said immediately. "Let it go to voicemail." We waited in tense silence as my answering machine picked up. "Margaret, you meddling old witch. You think you're so clever, don't you? You've destroyed everything I worked for." Jessica's voice was different from any tone I'd heard before, cold and venomous. "But here's the thing about destroying someone's life, Margaret. It gives them nothing left to lose. And when someone has nothing left to lose, they become very, very dangerous." The message ended with a click that seemed to echo through my kitchen. Agent Stone was already on her radio, coordinating with other units. "We need immediate protection for both Mrs. Thompson and her son. Jessica Coleman is now considered extremely dangerous." "What does that mean for us?" David asked. "It means you're going into protective custody until we can locate Jessica and determine the scope of this network." By that afternoon, David and I were installed in a safe house outside the city, surrounded by federal agents and cut off from our normal lives. It was surreal, like living inside a crime movie. Agent Stone visited us that evening with updates. "We've coordinated with authorities in Nevada, and Tyler and Mason Coleman are also in protective custody." Jessica's ex-husband confirmed that she had been in contact with unknown associates before her arrest. "How long will we have to stay here?" I asked. "Until we can neutralize the threat. Mrs. Thompson, this network has significant resources. They've been operating for years without detection, which suggests they have connections in law enforcement, financial institutions, possibly even government agencies." That night, lying in an unfamiliar bed in an unfamiliar room, I reflected on how dramatically my life had changed. 6 months ago, I was a lonely widow being used for my money. Now I was a target of an international criminal conspiracy. But I wasn't scared anymore. I was angry. Jessica had underestimated me from the beginning, assuming I was just another pathetic old woman who could be manipulated and discarded. She had no idea that investigating her had awakened something fierce and determined in me. Tomorrow, I decided, I was going to fight back. The opportunity to fight back came sooner than expected. Agent Stone arrived at the safe house the next morning with a proposal that was either brilliant or insane. "Mrs. Thompson, we've intercepted communications suggesting that Jessica is planning to flee the country. But first, she wants to eliminate the witnesses who can testify against her. Meaning us. Meaning you, specifically. David is secondary. You're the one who uncovered the network, gathered the evidence, convinced David to cooperate. In Jessica's mind, you're the primary threat." Agent Stone spread surveillance photos across the safe house table. "We know Jessica is meeting with associates tonight to plan your elimination. We want to use that against her." "How?" "We want you to be visible, predictable. Make Jessica think you've returned to your normal routine. When she moves against you, we'll be ready. David was horrified. Absolutely not. You're not using my mother as bait. But I was intrigued. What kind of protection are we talking about? Full surveillance, undercover agents positioned within a 2-block radius of your house. And you'd be wearing both audio and video recording devices. The moment Jessica or any of her associates approach, we'll have them. And what makes you think Jessica will take the bait? Agent Stone smiled grimly. Because she's arrogant and she's angry. You humiliated her, destroyed her marriage, cost her what was probably a substantial payday. She won't be able to resist the opportunity to confront you directly. I thought about Tyler and Mason, living in fear because their mother was a killer. I thought about the 12 dead men Agent Stone had mentioned, and all the future victims who would die if this network wasn't stopped. I'll do it. The next evening, I was back in my own house for the first time in a week. Every room had been wired with cameras and microphones so sophisticated they were virtually invisible. Agent Stone's team was positioned in houses and vehicles throughout my neighborhood, all connected by radio communication. I resumed my normal routine carefully. Grocery shopping on Tuesday, library volunteer work on Wednesday, all while knowing that Jessica was watching, planning, waiting for the right moment to strike. The waiting was nerve-wracking, but I felt strangely calm. For the first time in months, I was in control of the situation instead of reacting to Jessica's manipulations. On Thursday evening, as I was preparing dinner, my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw a young woman I didn't recognize, wearing what looked like a delivery uniform. "Who is it?" I called out. "Delivery for Margaret Thompson. I need a signature." My pulse quickened, but I kept my voice steady. "Just leave it on the porch, please." "I need a signature, ma'am. Company policy." I pressed the panic button Agent Stone had given me and heard the reassuring double beep that meant help was on the way. Through my peephole, the woman looked innocent enough, but her eyes were wrong, too calculating for her young face. "One moment, let me get my reading glasses." Instead of getting glasses, I moved to the kitchen window. Agent Stone had told me that if I felt threatened, the surveillance van would be visible from that vantage point. It was there, exactly where it should be. The doorbell rang again. "Mrs. Thompson?" "It's getting dark out here." I grabbed the kitchen knife David had insisted I keep handy and moved toward the back door, following Agent Stone's emergency protocol. The back door was locked, just as I'd left it. No sign of intrusion. But when I returned to the front of the house, Jessica was standing in my living room. "Hello, Margaret." Surprise. She was thinner than I remembered, and her eyes had a wild quality that hadn't been there before. She wore dark clothes and gloves, and her hair was shorter, darker. "Jessica, breaking and entering now?" "Oh, I didn't break anything. I've had a key to this house for months. David gave it to me for emergencies." Of course, I'd forgotten about that key, given during the early days when we all pretended to be a happy family. "Where's your delivery girl?" Jessica smiled, but it was cold and threatening. "Rebecca is keeping your FBI friends busy with a very convincing gas leak 2 blocks away. We have maybe 20 minutes before they realize it's a diversion." 20 minutes for what? "To finish what I started. You destroyed my life, Margaret. My marriage, my future, my freedom. It's only fair that I return the favor." Jessica pulled a gun from her jacket, something small and efficient-looking. "But first, I want you to know how this story ends." She walked around my living room, touching my belongings like she was appraising them. "You're going to have a tragic accident, Margaret. A fall down your basement stairs, probably caused by your age and poor balance. So sad. David will be devastated, but I'll be there to comfort him. You think David will take you back after you're arrested for murder?" "I was never arrested for murder. Insurance fraud, yes, but that's just a financial misunderstanding. My lawyer is very good." Jessica was confident, controlled, exactly like the woman who'd manipulated my son for 2 years. But I wasn't the same woman who'd been humiliated at Christmas dinner. "Jessica, there's something you should know about this whole situation." "What's that?" "You're not nearly as smart as you think you are." I smiled and pointed to the small camera mounted in the corner of my living room, its red recording light clearly visible. "Everything you've said since you walked in here has been recorded and transmitted to FBI headquarters in real time." Jessica's confident smile faltered as she noticed similar recording devices throughout the room. "I've had a very educational few months, Jessica. Turns out I'm quite good at investigation and preparation." As if on cue, My front door burst open, and Agent Stone entered with tactical officers, weapons drawn. FBI, drop the weapon. Jessica spun toward the door, and in that moment of distraction, I dove behind my couch as she fired wildly. The sound was deafening in my small living room. When the chaos ended, Jessica was on the floor in handcuffs, and Agent Stone was checking on me. Mrs. Thompson, are you injured? Just my ears from the gunshot. Did we get everything we need? Her full confession, recorded in high definition, plus attempted murder in front of federal witnesses. Jessica Coleman will never see the outside of a prison cell. As they led Jessica away, she turned back to me with pure hatred in her eyes. This isn't over, Margaret. My associates won't forget this. Your associates are about to be very busy with their own arrests, Agent Stone said. We coordinated simultaneous raids based on the intelligence gathered from this operation. The network is finished. That night, finally safe in my own home, I reflected on the incredible journey I'd lived through. It had started with humiliation at a Christmas dinner and ended with me helping to dismantle a criminal conspiracy. Most importantly, I'd discovered that I was far stronger and more capable than I'd ever imagined. Jessica had tried to use me, manipulate me, and ultimately kill me. She'd picked the wrong widow. The Christmas Revenge, chapters 7-11, corrected. 6 months after Jessica's arrest, I thought the nightmare was over. I was wrong. Agent Stone called me on a Tuesday morning, her voice carefully controlled but tense underneath. Mrs. Thompson, Jessica Coleman's appeal was successful. Her conviction was overturned on a technicality. My coffee cup froze halfway to my lips. What kind of technicality? Her new legal team argued that the recording devices in your home were installed without proper warrants. The judge ruled that her confession was inadmissible. I sank into my kitchen chair, overwhelmed by the implications. What does that mean? Jessica was released yesterday morning. We still have the insurance fraud charges, but without her confession about the murders, our case is significantly weakened. She's free? Temporarily. But Mrs. Thompson, there's something else. We've been monitoring Jessica's communications since her release. She's been in contact with people we believe are part of her network. Agent Stone explained that during Jessica's 6 months in prison, investigators had traced connections to similar operations across the country, but they'd been careful, communicating through lawyers and encrypted messages. The network is still active, and now they know we're watching them. That makes them more dangerous, not less. What kind of danger are we talking about? Jessica blames you for everything that happened to her. Her marriage, her arrest, the exposure of her network. In her mind, you're responsible for destroying her life. I thought about the hatred in Jessica's eyes as they'd led her away from my house. What precautions should we take? We're recommending that you and David temporarily relocate until we can assess the threat level. By that evening, David and I were back in protective custody, but this time felt different. We weren't waiting for Jessica to make a move. We were hiding from someone who had months to plan her revenge. Agent Stone visited us at the safe house with disturbing updates. We've intercepted fragments of communications suggesting Jessica's network has resources we didn't fully understand. Financial backing, legal connections, possibly corrupt law enforcement contacts. How is that possible? This organization has been operating for over a decade. Mrs. Thompson. They've had time to establish connections and build protection systems. Jessica wasn't just a serial killer. She was part of a sophisticated criminal enterprise. David looked exhausted by the stress. How long do we have to live like this? Until we can build a new case against Jessica or neutralize the network entirely. But 3 days later, Agent Stone arrived with news that changed everything. Jessica has vanished. She missed her check-in with parole yesterday, and when officers went to her registered address, the apartment was empty. Where could she go? With her network's resources, anywhere. But Mrs. Thompson, we don't think she's running. The intelligence we've gathered suggests she's planning something final. Agent Stone spread surveillance photos across the safe house table. These were taken yesterday at a restaurant 200 miles from here. Jessica meeting with 3 people we've identified as high-level network operatives. In the photos, Jessica looked confident, relaxed, like someone who knew she held all the advantages. They're not planning to flee, I realized. They're planning to eliminate the threat. We believe so. Mrs. Thompson, you represent an existential danger to their entire operation. As long as you're alive to testify, They'll never be completely safe. So what do we do? Agent Stone leaned forward, her expression grave. We have two options. One, keep you in protective custody indefinitely, essentially putting you in witness protection for the rest of your life. And option two, we use you as bait to draw Jessica out. But this time, we do it right. No legal technicalities, no room for appeals. David immediately objected. Mom, no, we're not going through this again. But I was thinking about Tyler and Mason, still living with the fear that their mother might return. About the other victims Jessica's network would claim if they weren't stopped permanently. What would this operation look like? Agent Stone explained a complex plan involving multiple agencies, careful legal oversight, and layers of protection I couldn't see. The difference this time is that we know Jessica has help, and we're prepared for that. We've identified her network's resources and tactics. And if something goes wrong? Mrs. Thompson, I won't lie to you. This is dangerous, but it might be the only way to end this permanently. That night, David and I talked until dawn about the choice we were facing. Mom, you've already done enough. You don't owe the world anything more. I owe it to myself, David. 6 months ago, I discovered I was stronger than I ever imagined. I can't go back to being afraid. But what if I spend the rest of my life hiding from a woman who thinks I'm weak? What if she hurts other people while I'm hiding in protective custody? David was quiet for a long time, then nodded reluctantly. If you're determined to do this, then I want to be part of the plan. David? No. Mom, I'm not a child. Jessica manipulated me, but I learned from it. I want to help stop her. 3 days later, the plan was in motion. I returned to my house, which had been equipped with even more sophisticated surveillance equipment. But this time, the FBI was prepared for Jessica's network. Not just Jessica herself. David moved back to his own house, but both our homes were now protected by invisible layers of federal agents and technology. The waiting began again, but this time I felt different. Not like prey waiting to be hunted, but like someone setting a trap for a predator. Jessica took the bait faster than expected. The first sign that Jessica was moving came when David called me in a panic. Mom, Tyler Coleman contacted me. He says Jessica tried to call him. My blood went cold. Tyler was now 14, living with his father in Nevada under assumed names for protection. What did she want? She told Tyler she was coming to get him and Mason, that they were going to be a family again. I immediately called Agent Stone, who confirmed my worst fears. Mrs. Thompson, we lost surveillance on Jessica 2 days ago. Her network helped her disappear completely. What about the boys? They're in federal protection. But Jessica's call proves she has resources we haven't identified. Somehow she tracked them, despite their new identities. Agent Stone arrived at my house within an hour, bringing disturbing intelligence. Jessica isn't working alone anymore. We believe she's being directed by someone higher up in the network. Someone with access to federal databases and protection programs. Someone in law enforcement? Possibly. Mrs. Thompson, this network has tentacles we're still discovering. That evening, as I was preparing dinner, Tyler called me directly. Mrs. Thompson, I had to sneak away to call you. Mom contacted us yesterday. Tyler, you should be talking to the FBI, not me. I tried, but the agents here don't believe how dangerous she is. They think she's just a sad woman trying to reconnect with her kids. My heart sank. If federal protection wasn't taking Jessica seriously, Tyler and Mason were in real danger. What did she say to you? She wanted us to meet her somewhere. Said she had money for us, that she'd changed. But Mrs. Thompson, I remember what she was like before. She's not changed. Tyler, do not meet with her under any circumstances. I wasn't planning to, but Mrs. Thompson, there's something else. Mom knew things about where we're staying, details she shouldn't know. That confirmed Agent Stone's fears about network infiltration of federal systems. Tyler, I need you to do exactly what I'm about to tell you. I gave Tyler Agent Stone's direct number and a code word that would immediately escalate his protection level. After we hung up, I called Agent Stone with my concerns about the adequacy of the boys' protection. Within hours, Tyler and Mason were moved to a more secure location with agents who understood the threat level. But Jessica's attempt to contact her children told us something important. She was getting desperate, making moves that exposed her location and resources. This is good news, Agent Stone explained during our evening briefing. Desperate criminals make mistakes. What kind of mistakes? The call to Tyler was traced to a cell tower in Pennsylvania. We're coordinating with state and local authorities to sweep the area. But I had a feeling Jessica was smarter than that. Agent Stone, what if contacting Tyler wasn't a mistake? What if it was a distraction? What do you mean? Jessica knows you're monitoring communications with her children. She had to know that call would be traced. What if she's drawing resources away from the real target? Agent Stone's expression went grim. You think she's using her own children as a diversion while she moves against you? I think Jessica is exactly that calculating. As if summoned by our conversation, motion sensors around my house began alerting. Agent Stone was immediately on her radio, coordinating with the surveillance teams positioned throughout my neighborhood. Mrs. Thompson, someone is probing your security perimeter, multiple contacts, professionally coordinated. This wasn't Jessica acting alone anymore. This was a military-style operation. Agent Stone, how many people are we talking about? At least 6, possibly more. They're testing our response patterns, looking for weaknesses. Through my living room window, I could see unmarked cars moving into position on my street. The FBI was mobilizing impressive resources, but Jessica's network was clearly equally prepared. My phone rang. Jessica's name appeared on the caller ID. Agent Stone nodded for me to answer while her team activated recording equipment. Hello, Jessica. Margaret, darling. You're looking lovely this evening. I felt a chill realizing Jessica could see me. Where are you? Close enough to watch you pace around your living room like a caged animal. How does it feel, Margaret, to be the hunted instead of the hunter? It feels like you're about to make a very large mistake. Jessica laughed, but it sounded forced. The mistake was yours when you decided to destroy my life. I simply revealed what you really are. What I really am is someone who's tired of games. Margaret, you have exactly 1 hour to dismiss your FBI babysitters and meet me alone, or Tyler and Mason Coleman will have a very unpleasant reunion with their mother. The line went dead. Agent Stone was already coordinating with Nevada authorities, but we both knew Jessica's network might have moved the boys again. Mrs. Thompson, do not even consider meeting with Jessica alone. Of course not. But Agent Stone, what if this is our opportunity? What do you mean? Jessica just committed to a time and place. She's confident enough to give us an ultimatum, which means she thinks she has advantages we don't know about. That's exactly why it's too dangerous. Or it's exactly why we need to spring our trap now, before she disappears again. Agent Stone studied me for a long moment. Mrs. Thompson, what are you thinking? I'm thinking that Jessica has underestimated me before, and she's about to do it again. Agent Stone's team worked through the night to prepare for Jessica's ultimatum. By morning, my house and the surrounding area were a carefully orchestrated trap designed to capture not just Jessica, but her entire network. Mrs. Thompson, this is our one chance to end this permanently, Agent Stone explained, as technicians made final adjustments to surveillance equipment. If Jessica escapes this time, she'll disappear forever. I understood the stakes. What do you need me to do? Exactly what Jessica expects. Act frightened, desperate, like you're making a foolish choice to protect Tyler and Mason. At exactly 1 hour from Jessica's ultimatum, I walked out of my house and climbed into my car. To anyone watching, I was a terrified old woman giving in to a criminal's demands. In reality, I was wearing recording devices so sophisticated they were undetectable, surrounded by invisible federal protection, and driving a car equipped with tracking technology that could pinpoint my location anywhere in the country. Jessica had chosen the meeting location carefully, a remote park outside the city with multiple escape routes and clear sight lines. Professional criminal thinking. I arrived to find the park apparently deserted, but I knew Jessica was watching from somewhere nearby. My phone rang immediately. Margaret, get out of your car and walk to the gazebo in the center of the park. I followed her instructions, every step monitored by satellite surveillance and recorded by multiple agencies. At the gazebo, I waited alone for several minutes before Jessica emerged from the woods, flanked by 2 men I didn't recognize. Jessica, you look well for someone living as a fugitive. I look like someone who's finally free, Margaret. Free from marriage, free from pretending to be someone I'm not. She was different from the woman who'd manipulated my son. Harder, more confident, like prison had stripped away her last pretense of civility. What do you want from me, Jessica? I want you to understand something. When you destroyed my marriage to David, you didn't just cost me a comfortable life. You cost me millions of dollars. Millions! One of the men stepped forward. Mrs. Thompson, allow me to explain. Jessica was part of a carefully planned operation targeting your son. His life insurance, combined with his inheritance from you, would have yielded approximately $2.8 million. I realized these weren't just Jessica's criminal associates. They were business partners who'd invested in her marriage to David. Instead, Jessica continued, your meddling cost our organization a substantial return on investment. That kind of loss requires compensation. What kind of compensation? The second man smiled coldly. Your estate is worth approximately $1.2 million, Mrs. Thompson. We're prepared to accept that as partial payment for our losses. And if I refuse? Jessica's mask finally slipped completely. Then Tyler and Mason Coleman die, followed by your son David, followed by you. But Mrs. Thompson, we'd prefer to handle this as a business transaction. She pulled out papers that looked like legal documents. These transfer ownership of all your assets to a shell company controlled by our organization. Sign them and everyone lives. Refuse and everyone dies. As I pretended to consider their offer, I was actually buying time for Agent Stone's team to position themselves. Through my concealed earpiece, I could hear coordinated movement closing in on our location. Jessica, I have a counteroffer. You're hardly in a position to negotiate, aren't I? I smiled and looked directly at the surveillance camera I knew was positioned in the gazebo's rafters. Everything you've said in the last 10 minutes has been recorded by federal agents. Jessica's eyes widened as she followed my gaze and spotted the hidden camera. Moreover, I continued, Tyler and Mason Coleman are safe in federal custody. Your organization's assets have been frozen by multiple agencies, and you are currently surrounded by armed federal agents. As if on cue, Agent Stone's voice echoed across the park through speakers. This is the FBI. You are surrounded. Lay down your weapons and place your hands on your heads. Jessica's business partners immediately drew guns, but they were vastly outgunned. Within seconds, tactical officers emerged from concealment positions throughout the park. Jessica Coleman, you're under arrest for kidnapping, extortion, and conspiracy to commit murder. As federal agents moved in, Jessica looked at me with something that might have been respect. You cunning old woman. When did you become so dangerous? The moment you underestimated me. Jessica was led away in handcuffs, but this time there would be no legal technicalities, no overturned convictions. The evidence was overwhelming and properly obtained. Agent Stone joined me in the gazebo as the scene was secured. Mrs. Thompson, how did you know we had enough evidence for conspiracy charges? I didn't know. But Jessica's business partners provided the missing piece when they explained their financial motivation. That made this a federal racketeering case, not just attempted murder. You should consider a career with the Bureau. I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in months. Thank you, but I think I've had enough excitement for several lifetimes. But as the federal agents processed the crime scene, I realized this victory was bigger than just stopping Jessica. We'd dismantled an entire network that had been preying on vulnerable people for years. That evening, Agent Stone called with final updates. The two men with Jessica have provided information about the organization's structure in exchange for plea deals. We expect to make arrests in 12 states over the next week. What about Jessica? Life in prison, no possibility of parole. The conspiracy charges alone carry mandatory sentencing, and we have her confession on federal recording equipment. Tyler called me that night from his secure location. Mrs. Thompson, Agent Stone told us what happened. You stopped our mom permanently this time. We all stopped her, Tyler. Your courage in calling me, your testimony about her past, all of it was essential. What happens to us now? Now you get to live normal lives without being afraid. You get to choose who you become, without your mother's shadow hanging over you. After we hung up, I sat in my living room reflecting on the incredible year I'd lived. It had started with humiliation at a Christmas dinner and ended with me helping to dismantle a criminal organization that had killed dozens of people. Most importantly, I discovered that I was far more resilient and capable than anyone had ever imagined, including myself. Jessica's greatest mistake wasn't underestimating my love for David or my determination to protect him. Her greatest mistake was assuming that quiet people are weak people. 6 months after Jessica's final arrest and conviction, I thought I could finally return to a normal life. But normal had changed for me in ways I was still discovering. The media attention had been overwhelming. Grandmother Brings Down Murder Network made national headlines, and suddenly, everyone wanted to interview the 65-year-old widow who'd exposed an international criminal conspiracy. I declined most interview requests, but I did agree to speak with a journalist from 60 Minutes. I wanted people to understand that anyone could be targeted by predators like Jessica, and that loneliness and grief made people vulnerable to manipulation. "What would you tell other people who might be in similar situations?" the reporter asked. "Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong about someone's story, investigate. Don't ignore red flags because you want to believe someone cares about you. And most importantly, don't be afraid to ask for help." The interview aired on a Sunday evening, and by Monday morning, my phone was ringing constantly. People from across the country calling to share their own stories of financial exploitation by family members, romantic partners, or supposed friends. Many of the stories were heartbreakingly similar to my own experience. Older people being used for their money, then discarded or threatened when they tried to assert boundaries. Agent Stone called with an unexpected proposition. "Mrs. Thompson, the Bureau would like to consult with you on developing training materials for investigating financial exploitation of seniors. I'm flattered, but I'm not qualified to train federal agents. You're more qualified than you think. You identified patterns and connections that our investigators missed. You developed effective interview techniques with Jessica's children, and you understood criminal psychology well enough to predict Jessica's behavior." The consulting work was fascinating. I helped develop protocols for recognizing organized exploitation networks and techniques for encouraging victims to come forward with information. More personally, the experience had transformed my relationship with David. We'd gone through something traumatic together, and it had created a bond of mutual respect I'd never experienced with my adult son. "Mom, I've been thinking about everything that happened," he said during one of our weekly dinners. "I realized I never really saw you as a complete person before. You were just Mom, someone who was supposed to take care of everyone else. And now? Now I see you as Margaret Thompson, who happens to be my mother, but who also has her own strength, intelligence, and courage." David had started dating again, much more carefully this time. Sarah Martinez, Detective Martinez's sister, was a teacher who'd been through her own difficult divorce and understood the importance of taking relationships slowly. "I'd like you to meet her," David said. "She's nervous about meeting the woman who took down a criminal network. Tell her I'm much more impressed by people who teach children than by people who catch criminals." When I met Sarah the following week, I immediately liked her. She was warm, genuine, and clearly smitten with my son. But more importantly, David was different around her. More himself, more relaxed, like he wasn't trying to prove anything. "David told me about everything you went through," Sarah said as we prepared dinner together. "You must have been terrified. Parts of it were terrifying, but mostly I was angry. Jessica thought she could use me and my family, then throw us away when we were no longer useful. What made you decide to fight back instead of just accepting it?" I thought about that question seriously. I think I finally understood that being kind doesn't mean being weak, and being generous doesn't mean being stupid. Tyler and Mason came to visit me that autumn. They were 15 and 17 now, both taller and more confident than the scared children I'd first spoken with on the phone. "Mrs. Thompson," Tyler said as we sat in my garden, "we wanted to thank you for stopping our mom before she hurt more people, and for helping us understand that we don't have to be like her." Mason added quietly. "What do you want to be like?" Tyler smiled. "I want to be someone who helps people instead of hurting them, maybe a counselor or social worker." "I want to be a teacher," Mason said, "like David's girlfriend Sarah." It struck me that these boys had taken their mother's criminal legacy and transformed it into motivation for helping others. They were proof that people could choose their own path regardless of where they came from. My phone rang that evening. Agent Stone. "Mrs. Thompson, I have news about the network investigation." "Good news or bad news?" "Both. The good news is that we've made arrests in 47 cases across 15 states and 3 countries. The bad news is that we've identified over 200 victims, many of them already dead. The scope of the criminal enterprise Jessica had been part of was staggering. For over a decade, they'd been systematically targeting and killing vulnerable people for financial gain. Mrs. Thompson, your investigation quite literally saved hundreds of lives. The network was expanding their operations when you exposed them. What happens now? Now we prosecute everyone involved and try to provide closure for the families of victims. That night, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought me to this point. A year ago, I was a lonely widow, being used for my money by my own family. Tonight, I was someone who'd helped bring justice to hundreds of victims and their families. Jessica had tried to destroy me, but instead, she'd helped me discover strength I never knew I possessed. My phone buzzed with a text from David. "Dinner tomorrow? Sarah's cooking." I smiled and typed back, "I'd love that." For the first time in years, I was genuinely excited about tomorrow. 1 year later, I was standing in a federal courtroom watching Jessica Coleman receive her final sentence for the crimes revealed by our investigation. Life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus consecutive sentences for each count of murder, fraud, and racketeering. As the judge dismissed court, Jessica turned to look at me one final time. But instead of the hatred I'd seen before, I saw something unexpected. Defeat. Not just legal defeat, but the complete collapse of someone who'd built their entire identity on manipulating and controlling others. "Mrs. Thompson?" Tyler's voice broke through my thoughts. He was 16 now, taller than me, and planning to start college next year on a full academic scholarship. "How are you feeling, sweetheart?" "Relieved and proud. We stopped her from hurting anyone else." Yes, we had. But more than that, we'd all become stronger people in the process. After leaving the courthouse, I drove to the cemetery where Robert was buried. I hadn't visited since before my ordeal with Jessica began, when I was still the lonely widow who let people use her for money. "Hello, darling," I said, settling on the familiar bench beside his headstone. "I wanted to tell you about my year." I told him everything. About Jessica's manipulations, the investigation, the danger, the FBI operation. About discovering courage I never knew I possessed and protecting our son when it mattered most. "I think you would have been proud of me. I finally learned to stand up for myself." The wind rustled through the oak trees, and I felt a peace I hadn't experienced in years. Robert's death had devastated me, left me vulnerable to people who would exploit my grief. But it had also freed me to discover who I really was underneath all those years of being someone's wife and mother. My phone rang. David. "Mom, are you at the cemetery?" "Just finishing up." "Why? Could you come to my house? Sarah and I have something important to tell you." I found them both in the living room, looking nervous and excited. David was holding Sarah's hand, and I immediately suspected what their news might be. "Mom, Sarah and I are engaged." My heart soared. After everything David had been through with Jessica, seeing him find genuine love with someone worthy of him felt like a miracle. "Sarah, welcome to the family. Officially this time," she hugged me tight. "Margaret, I promise I'm nothing like Jessica. Sweetheart, you're everything Jessica pretended to be. Kind, genuine, loyal, and most importantly, you love my son for who he is, not what he can provide." "Actually, Mom, there's more news," David said, grinning broadly. "More?" Sarah placed her hand on her still flat stomach. "We're having a baby." I stared at them in amazement. After years of Jessica's lies about being unable to have children, David was going to be a father with someone who truly loved him. "When?" "Spring," Sarah said. "We wanted you to be the first to know." That evening, the three of us sat on David's porch talking about the future. Wedding plans, baby preparations, how different life would be with genuine happiness instead of manufactured drama. "Mom, I have a confession," David said, as Sarah dozed against his shoulder. "When you first started investigating Jessica, I was angry with you. I thought you were just jealous and meddling." "I remember. But you saved my life. If you hadn't exposed her when you did, I'd probably be dead by now. You saved your own life by being willing to listen to the truth, even when it was painful. What you did took incredible courage. Standing up to Jessica, working with the FBI, putting yourself in danger to stop her network." I looked at my son and his fiancée, thinking about the grandchild they were expecting, and felt a contentment deeper than anything I'd experienced since Robert's death. David, for most of my adult life, I measured my worth by how much other people needed me. I thought being useful was the same as being loved. And now? Now I know the difference. Jessica needed my money, but she never valued me as a person. You and Sarah don't need my money, but you value me for who I am. 6 months later, I was standing in my backyard wearing a mother-of-the-groom dress, watching David marry Sarah in a ceremony that was everything his first wedding wasn't: genuine, joyful, surrounded by people who truly cared about them. Tyler and Mason were there, having become like honorary grandsons to me over the past year. Agent Stone came with her family, having become an unexpected friend through our shared experience. As David and Sarah exchanged vows they'd written themselves, I thought about Jessica, spending her first months in maximum security prison. She'd wanted to destroy me, to use me up and throw me away. Instead, she'd helped me discover that I was far more resilient and formidable than anyone had ever imagined, including myself. The reception was held in the community center where I'd started volunteering again, this time helping other seniors who'd been financially exploited by family members or romantic partners. My experience with Jessica had taught me to recognize the warning signs and provide support for people going through similar situations. "Mrs. Thompson," Tyler said during the reception, now almost 17 and preparing for his senior year of high school, "I wanted to thank you again for everything you did. Tyler, you were incredibly brave, calling me, providing evidence, testifying against your own mother. That took more courage than anything I did. I learned something important from you," he said seriously. "I learned that good people can fight back and win. And I learned from you that courage comes in all sizes." Later that evening, after the celebration wound down and everyone had gone home, David and Sarah sat with me on my porch. "Mom, we've been talking," David said. "When the baby comes, we want them to know their grandmother as the woman who saved their father's life." "David, that's not—" "Mom, it's exactly what happened. Jessica was planning to kill me for insurance money, and you stopped her. Our child will grow up knowing they have a grandmother who's a genuine hero." As I drifted off to sleep that night, I reflected on the incredible transformation I'd experienced. Jessica had tried to reduce me to a convenient source of money, then eliminate me when I became inconvenient. But she'd picked the wrong widow. She'd confused kindness for weakness, generosity for stupidity, and patience for cowardice. Jessica had built her criminal career on exploiting people like me, older, lonely, eager to help. Her greatest mistake was assuming that because I'd been quiet for 64 years, I was powerless. Instead, those 64 years had taught me things Jessica never learned: real love versus manipulation, genuine relationships versus transactional ones, the difference between being used and being valued. Tomorrow, I would wake up in my own house, safe and free, surrounded by people who respected me for who I was. I had a son who finally saw me clearly, a wonderful daughter-in-law who appreciated my strength, and a grandchild on the way who would know me as someone who fought back when it mattered. Jessica Coleman had wanted to destroy me, but instead, she'd helped me find myself. And that, I thought as sleep finally came, was the sweetest revenge of all. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.